Okay, I'm skipping the intro this time, so here's all the Kingdom Hearts games from 1990. We'll cover them in the video. So, we got Goofy's Railway Express up first, then DuckTales The Quest for Gold, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers Adventures in Nimnul's Castle, Final Fantasy E, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Mickey's ABC's A Day at the Fair, Mickey's 1, 2, 3 The Big Surprise Party, Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse, and Final Fantasy Legend 2. And I also encourage you to watch my older videos for context if you want. Goofy's Railway Express is a game that I accidentally beat twice while I was trying to figure out the controls. There's actually no way to lose this game. I guess maybe there's no way to win either. I'm just saying I beat it because it started repeating after I went back and forth along the tracks once, because that's really all that happens in this game. The train just goes, and there's not a lot you can do to change that. But occasionally, when the smoke comes out of the top of the steam engine, a shape pops up. So I noticed right away that every button on the keyboard would give me the same feedback, which I assumed at first meant that every button had a different shape associated with it, and I was supposed to figure out what buttons had the shapes associated with all of the different characters on the keyboard, right? I played the whole game that way the first time, trying to figure out which buttons I was supposed to push for each of the things on the screen, and I felt like I was getting a couple right, but after a while that stopped making any sense, and I tried not pushing buttons until the shapes showed up just by themselves, which they did. So then I figured, okay, it's just timing based, and I press any of the keys whenever the shape shows up. And that's basically right, but the thing is, you're not actually supposed to hit it every time a shape shows up either. So even though the game itself is always giving you positive feedback when you do, on my third attempt, I started trying to just wait through some of them, and yeah, so sure enough, if you don't push the shapes, they'll show up more often, and you'll get the shapes that these characters want you to land on. So you can only pick up one character at a time, and your train only shows one of them in it at a time no matter what. So I really ended up playing the game all the way through 4 times just to make sure I'd seen absolutely everything, because I had to pick everyone up once. There are only a few screens that you actually move across to, so it was pretty tedious. But Goofy finally gets a name after appearing in like 3 other games. Okay, actually, I think his name was probably mentioned in Donald Duck's Playground. I think I might have had that wrong. It is the first time he's gotten his name on a game, though, which, considering he's one of the big 3, it's about time. But, of course, Mickey is right there with him, and their friends Donald Duck, Daisy Duck, Pluto, and Scrooge McDuck all make appearances. This game takes place on Earth because we again see one of the stops is Duckburg, and that's pretty much all there is to Goofy's Railway Express. DuckTales The Quest for Gold is pretty much a direct sequel to DuckTales, because it opens with this bearded duck from the last game, whose name is apparently Flintheart, declaring that he is sick of being number 2, and that he and Scrooge will have to compete for Dime Magazine's Duck of the Year by earning the most money within the next 30 days. The stakes have never been lower. So, Scrooge does what he does most and goes hunting all around the earth for treasure. There are a few types of different levels, but they all start with an airplane part. The controls for this part are weird, and I don't like them. Space is gas, up is down, and down is up, basically. Sometimes Flintheart will be there with his ship, and you have to race him. If your plane gets destroyed, you lose out on the treasure. That's probably also true if he gets there first, but that never happened to me. I either got there first or destroyed my plane every time, so who knows. The pilot does get a name this time around. His name is Launchpad McQuack, which is interesting because I guess he's maybe not related to the others. And there's also a new character who's like a nerd, and if you crash when you're not in a race against Flintheart, he'll tell you that the plane will take 2 days to repair and that you lose a bunch of money. Donald is absent again, but Dewey, Louie, Unnamed Girl Duck, and Huey are here, just like the first DuckTales.
So sometimes you guide them all through a maze of caverns to find treasure. And there are basically three outcomes. One, you get the treasure. Two, you fall into a pit. Or three, a mummy shows up. If either of the last two things happen, Launchpad McQuack will come and save you. That's one of 4 different gameplay segments that you might get depending on where you picked to go. Sometimes the boys will either climb up a mountain or walk through a jungle. I never got to the end of any of the jungle parts. Those are really hard. You have to keep moving. You can't fall down unless there's a hippo under you, but sometimes those just sink anyway. And there are snakes, panthers, toucans, and monkeys that all try to ruin your day. Plus, the platforming is just kind of hard on its own sometimes. The mountain isn't super easy either because the Beagle Boys and the girl Dracula Duck, again from the first game, are both there and they try to stop you. Plus, there's falling rocks, bears, and bighorn sheep. But in this one, you can touch the ground and you get a rope you can toss, and sometimes the caves will connect to higher up caves that let you skip a chunk of the level, so it's more doable. The last one is super doable. It's just pointing a camera at different animals and taking pictures of them. I never got that much money from doing this, but I enjoyed it. Who is that? Daisy? Is every duck besides Donald here? That dude's family must miss him while he's out hanging out with Mickey and Goofy. Aside from that, you can play the stock market, which I didn't do because it sounded boring, and you can dive into your big pile of money, which I did do because that sounded fun. And it was, but it didn't really help. So, yeah, anyway, after 30 days, either you or Flintheart wins Dime Magazine's Duck of the Year, and that's the whole game. I got both outcomes, but it's not like it matters who wins. They're both terrible guys.
Now, so far in this series, we've already met a lot of characters from Disney Town. Most of the major players, not so much the background characters like Horace Horsecollar, but we've seen Huey, we've seen Pete, we've seen Pluto, Daisy, Dewey, Donald, Mickey, Minnie, Louie, and Goofy. There are 2 more names that pop up a lot in the main series, but who are so far missing from that list. One of them is Chip. The other that I was thinking of is Dale. So, ladies and so on, I know we've seen a lot of games revolving around this social group, but yes, it is finally time to round it out with the game Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers Adventures in Nimnul's Castle.
And yeah, so this game actually opens with some other characters we hadn't met yet. Monterey Jack, who gets kidnapped. Zipper, who is a fly, and this girl, who they never give a name. Now, this is still the distant past from the Kingdom Hearts we're familiar with, most of us, and I'm sure they're going to eventually meet up with Mickey and the gang, so it's not at all weird for them to have a different set of friends back in the day when this game takes place. But what is weird is for one of those friends to be a mouse, and for that mouse to be the same size they are. These two have always been tiny. And I mean, they still are, but now mice are suddenly small too?
What? Did you forget about your main character, Nomura? Mickey Mouse is at the center of all these games, and he is a mouse who is large. Monterey Jack here, clearly also a mouse. Look at his tail. Look at that mouse trap he's caught in. Matter of fact, this girl looking kind of mousy too. She's probably just another chipmunk, but she's got some big ears. Anyway, that don't make no sense. Why would this mouse be tiny, but like still otherwise pretty much look like how Mickey Mouse looks? Like different species of mouse, I guess. This feels like kind of a stretch to me, or like just an unnecessary contrivance. Unless, okay, maybe they're showing that Chip and Dale are not from Earth, where Mickey's from, and that on their planet people are just tiny. Like the world is built for big people, but the actual people in it are still tiny. I don't know.
Well, anyway, the villains are mostly robot dogs and robot arms, but there is this one terrifying clown on the first 3 screens who throws slime at you. I'm not afraid of clowns, like, at all. I'm like down with some of my best friends are clowns, but that dude is scary. I thought he was going to be the final boss, but he doesn't show up ever again. He's just a regular enemy, I guess. Creepy. I don't know. Maybe he's Nimnul and this is his castle. We don't really get a boss fight. You kind of do, but you just go through 9 screens in about 9 minutes and that's it. The game's over and you won. A lot of questions getting raised here. That's how you know it's a Kingdom Hearts game.
For Final Fantasy III, I decided to give the Pixel Remaster a try this time around. There are a few pretty different versions of this game floating around, but the 3D versions just seem too different. They've got different main characters and everything, so sort of like Nier versus Nier Replicant, I guess, if you know those. Anyway, as soon as I booted it up, I realized it was bugged, and I couldn't name any of my characters, which for me is a very big deal. I could have continued with the default names, but a quick search told me that this is a problem with the pirated version of the game. So after deliberating for, a couple of days, I decided that yes, it was in fact worth paying $15 to me to name the characters after the members of the Black Eyed Peas.
So, with that out of the way, we set out on our journey. The Peas start out as Onion Knights exploring a cave together, but also, all the world's light is fading, and the crystals choose them to become the new warriors of light. Now, I'll be the first to admit that whenever any Kingdom Hearts game starts talking about light and darkness, it gets hard to pay attention to. The only time I've really cared how light works is in 358 over 2 days when Axel says that red light travels the furthest, because this never really ties in or gets brought back up at all, and I think that's super interesting, but basically, yeah, when I covered the first Final Fantasy, I'm not sure I even mentioned that the heroes in that game were called the Warriors of Light, but they were, and they each carried a crystal with them. The crystals never really came into play or even showed up in the inventory, but they were there. They each had one of the crystals with them. And now here, this big crystal is choosing these 4 and letting them pick jobs. So, the recolors they have as Onion Knights don't carry over to the other jobs. They're all about to start looking pretty generic, unfortunately. It was easy to pick Red Mage for Taboo because this is his exact style, but everybody else looks kind of wrong no matter what. I'm not sure if Japanese game developers knew about black people in 1990, or women. Anyway, one of the first places you find in this game is the Ghost Town, where everyone has been cursed by a djinn to be invisible. It's not really explained how this interferes with their lives, but I think they can't pick stuff up because none of the shops are open, and the blacksmith says he can't do his job until you put them back to normal. One of these cursed villagers is named Sid, and wouldn't you know it, Sid has an airship that he keeps out in the desert, and he's willing to let you use it to lift the curse. So that's neat. There's also a missing princess named Sarah, just like in the first Final Fantasy. She spells her name differently, but that's definitely another callback. So yeah, you kill the djinn, and then you get to see Sid's face finally, which looks like this. And he's married to this lady.
I'm not going to get too far down the Sid rabbit hole this time. I think it's a pretty common name in this world.
So, you get the airship right away, basically, but not for long, because you slam it into a big rock. There's a pretty cool section here where you just get introduced to a bunch of the cool gimmicks that the game has, one after another. Like, you go to fight a dragon, and they're way too strong, so you just run away. But then you get the spell that makes you tiny, and you have to cast it on yourself to get to this tiny village and retrieve the gem from a rat. And that gives you a boat that you can use to sail around and find this guy who gives you the frog spell. And then there's a mission where you use that. This section doesn't feel tedious at all, even though it doesn't have a lot to do with the main plot, because you keep getting interesting abilities and modes of transportation, and the sense of progression really comes from that more than the way you're scaling your stats up, which, of course, you're also doing this whole time. Honestly, this is peak game design. This is also where you find chocobos. And since you're on a floating continent, there's a land barrier that goes all the way around it, and you can just ride a chocobo all the way around the map. There's not really anything there, but you can, and I did. Now, there is a village you can go to that does have some pretty interesting lore stuff going on, too. See, apparently there were some warriors of dark that had to save the world from being enveloped in light at some point, and that's kind of huge.
Now, I know I literally just said that I don't really care about the light and darkness stuff, but forget that for a second. I have always wanted to know about this one specific aspect of darkness and light. You see, most of the Kingdom Hearts games acknowledge that darkness isn't just evil, but it is a corrupting force that will bring violent, mindless, heart-seeking monsters into your world and threaten to swallow it on the regular. And light is what most of the worlds we see in the series are made of. Probably all the planets we saw in those 80s games are worlds of light. That's just how it goes. It's also the force that drives back the darkness. And the 7 princesses of heart are able to exist as beings of pure light with no darkness inside their hearts, and they all seem nice. So whenever people talk about balance between light and dark, I'm like, okay, but why though? Like, the games never really address what's good about darkness or what's bad about light. It's really frustrating. Maybe this game will do some cool things with it.
So after a little bit, you get to go to the village of Gishel, which is famous for sheep and locksmiths. You can buy magic keys here that open doors, but they also grow greens here that chocobos love. And if you use a Gishel green in a chocobo forest, Fat Chocobo, who is the leader of the chocobos, shows up. And you can use him to store items inside his big belly. I like Fat Chocobo. I wish they'd give him a cooler name than just Fat Chocobo because he's great. You go around getting powers from 4 crystals. The second one is right here on the floating island with you, and it gives you a few job options, but nothing that really meshed all that well with how my party was already set up. It's kind of basic of me to have a warrior, a black mage, and a white mage, maybe, but it's just a really effective party dynamic, and at this point in the game, yeah, playing through the story seemed more fun than experimenting with these classes. I did trade my monk out for a ranger here, which I think was a good call, and I switched from a warrior to a knight here, which was pretty much just a straight upgrade. The next crystal is where things started to get a little more interesting with the different classes, though. To get to the next crystal, you actually do leave the floating island and go to the main, planet. But when you get there, it's flooded until you've got the water crystal taken care of. So once you do that, the water level goes back down, and somehow there's living plants and people on these continents, which never really gets explained. But even weirder than that, there are mountains here now that are apparently too high for you to fly an airship over, even though the places that weren't underwater a minute ago are still there, and you can fly over those. So when I got to here, I wanted to upgrade Will.i.am from a knight to a dark knight, but it wouldn't let him use any of my sword weapons, even though it says he can use swords. I had become very attached to this blood sword that gives me back health. It's just like the one that I hate from Final Fantasy II. It would be a really great weapon for a black knight to have, but for whatever reason, the game says no. I also tried to swap Apple to App to an Evoker. Thought it would be cool to do some summons, but he doesn't know any summons, so he was useless, and I just swapped him back to Black Mage after a couple of fights. I tried putting Taboo as a bard, but he only knew one spell, and it was a worse heal, which just wasn't doing it for me. So after a little bit of that, I put him back as a white mage too. This didn't happen with Apple to App, but Taboo lost all of his MP as soon as I swapped him to bard, since I guess bards don't count as a magic class. So I had to rest again to get that MP back, and that just sucks. I did change Fergie to a black belt, and that turned out to be a good idea, because she was immediately my strongest character pretty much as soon as I did. Kick was really good until it wasn't, at which point I was hitting for so much damage with my basic attack that it didn't matter. A little bit later, I did try using some of these classes again, and Viking turned out to be a really good tank. Evoker still wasn't good for much, but it's interesting that these summons are here, because you can summon Chocobo, Ifrit, Shiva, or Titan. Anyway, there's also Dragoon. Now, this is not a good class. Their thing is the jump ability that lets them attack and disappear for one turn, which is great against one gimmicky boss fight and useless against most enemies. But we're not really here to talk about gameplay advantages, we're here to talk about lore, and this class is really interesting to the lore. because in Final Fantasy II, dragoons went extinct with the death of Ricard. But the child, Kain, who was the son of a dragoon, was still alive at the time, and I happen to know he's going to be our boy in Final Fantasy IV. I haven't gotten to that game yet, but if Final Fantasy II Cid did invent airships, then this library that has a list of the best airships in the world proves that this game has to take place after number 2.
Now, you don't see any other dragoons just walking around, and you are special because you're chosen by crystals or whatever, but it seems to me like the dragoons are popping up a little too much for this to have happened between Kain being a baby and Kain being an adult. So, there's a pretty good chance on that basis that Final Fantasy III happens after Final Fantasy IV. We'll see when we get there.
But Brooke,
I hear you asking.
if these games take place on the same planet and relatively close together on the timeline, then why is the geography so inconsistent?
Well, if you'll recall, we never saw how the world looked at the end of Final Fantasy I after Chaos was defeated. Chaos was a very powerful guy, and he could have easily been responsible for shaping the world of that game in a very literal way over the 2,000 years between the past and future events there. So, Final Fantasy II doesn't need to look like Final Fantasy I for them to be on the same world.
And here in Final Fantasy III, where we have all these class options opening up from the Water Crystal, there's one more I haven't told y'all about yet, and that is the Geomancer. Now, Geomancers use nature itself as a weapon. They unleash magical attacks to move the terrain and pummel enemies. And you do see some Geomancers walking around, so they're definitely out here moving the terrain to suit their own needs. Tectonic activity takes a long time to shift land around, but if you got these little gremlins moving it around all willy-nilly, of course things are going to start to look pretty different pretty quickly. There's one more important lore thing at around this point in the game. There's a reason darkness is about to envelop the world, and it's a guy named Xand doing it. Now, a seasoned veteran of the series like myself will spot a name like Xand and immediately think, that must be a nobody. We haven't gotten to nobodies yet, but basically, in this universe, your heart can turn into a monster, and the rest of your body becomes a nobody without it, which means that you have to rearrange the letters in your name and add an X somewhere. That's what you have to do if you're a Kingdom Hearts. So, for example, Evan changes to Vexen. Lee changes to Axel. And Dylan here starts going by Zaldin. If I had a nobody, I'd be called Crowbox. So, we can extrapolate from this that before he lost his heart, Xand would have probably been named Dean. So Dean is a former apprentice of a magus named Noah, and he's mad that he was made mortal, while Noah's other two apprentices, Doga and Dune, got dominion over magic and the dream world, respectively. Dean got a bad deal, and he's super mad. So you have to track down the other apprentices, and Doga has 3 bodyguards who are Moogles. Yeah, so we got to the Moogles. Moogles here, everybody!
Tonight's the night, let's live it up. I got my money, let's spend it up. Go out and smash it, like oh my god. Jump off that sofa, let's kick it off. I know that we'll have a ball if we get down and go out and just lose it all. I feel stressed out, I wanna let it go. Let's go way out, spaced out and losing our control. Fill up my cup, Mazel tov. Look at it dance, just take it off. Let's paint the town, we'll shut it down. Let's burn the roof, and we'll do it again. Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, and do it, and do it. Let's live it up and do it, and do it, and do it, do it, do it. Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, cause I got a feel.
But they're only in one scene and they don't do anything. So a bunch of stuff happens and you get to the last crystal. This one only gives you 3 jobs, which are upgrades for the 3 magic classes. You've got your Magus for black mages, your Devout for white mages, which is a cute little cat boy, and you got your Summoner, which I didn't bother trying because Enchanter never seemed worth it, and this is an upgrade of that. But you really only keep these for like an hour and a half anyway, about 1.5 dungeons. See, you get these at the beginning of this maze dungeon, but I got wiped trying to fight this guy on my first time, so I just walked around the room that it's in and did the dungeon first so I'd be strong enough. So by the time I got these classes, that one was already out of the way. And as soon as you go through this door up here, there's another room that takes you to Nautilus. I think it was called Nautilus. The land where all the weapons too powerful for mankind are held. And it's a pretty tough dungeon, but your party is OP by this point, and there are elixirs lying around and a ton of chests. So a couple of those get you all the way through it in one go. And that gives you a ton of legendary weapons like Excalibur, Masamune, Ragnarok. And it also gives you all the best spells and the 2 best classes in the game, Sage and Ninja. Sage is just good at all the magic, so there's no reason not to upgrade all of your casters to Sages. And Ninja is more or less the same for melee classes. They can use any weapon or armor, and they have the throw ability that lets you use Shuriken, and those deal about 5 times as much damage as any of your attacks with your new ultimate weapons, which of course are already kinda busted. There's also a Sage there who says they can give you the ultimate summon if you've already found the 3 hidden ones. Now I did get Leviathan since she was pretty easy to spot on the map, but I didn't use a guide for any of this game up to this point. I haven't been using summons, so wasn't sure if it was worth it. I went back for Bahamut too, but he didn't seem to be home. I do kind of want to know what's a tier above Odin, though. Like, if we've already got Titan, what else would possibly beat the strongest god besides a Titan? So my curiosity won out, and I grabbed those summons real quick. It turned out the answer is nothing. The Sage just sells you additional copies of each summon in case you want 2 summoners in your party, which I don't. Well, on to the finale, I guess. Oh, wait, no. Sorry. I almost forgot. Odin is in this game. So he just chills out in an empty room until someone comes along to fight him. And the fight is completely optional and probably not exactly canon. But if you beat him, you do get him as a summon. That only matters because he comes back in later games. Odin actually plays a sort of important role in Kingdom Hearts lore. In the game Kingdom Hearts Union Cross Dark Road, Odin acts as a mentor to Ericus and Xehanort, who are 2 pretty important characters. Xehanort is, well, the main villain of pretty much the entire series so far, and Ericus is his light counterpart. Ericus doesn't actually do that much besides have a friendly rivalry with Xehanort and train 3 pupils, Terra, Aqua, and Ventus, and those 3 are all pretty important. Xehanort, though, he has the ultimate goal of creating a perfect balance between light and darkness, which threatens the worlds of light that people tend to like, because darkness just doesn't have a whole lot going for it by comparison. Remember that for later. After climbing all the way up the crystal tower, you reach a mirror, and gazing into it paralyzes you. Doga, who you killed earlier and who is now a ghost, appears and says he's going to gather 5 people with hearts made of pure light in order to fight off these worms for you. So yeah, I immediately jumped at that because every Kingdom Hearts player knows that there are 7 princesses of heart whose hearts are devoid of darkness, and this gives them power over darkness. I'm always saying this. So yeah, the first person he goes and grabs is actually Princess Sarah. You remember her? She's one of the 5 originals, I guess. Or, well, maybe not originals. Maybe just ones that are available right now. There might have been other princesses before this. As of now, these are the earliest ones I know of. So who else have we got? Oh, Cid. This, Cid is a Princess of Heart. I don't guess that makes much of a difference, but... I mean, they're always princesses, right? Except, well, okay, Alice isn't. Or actually, Cinderella kind of isn't either. So, okay, wait, so you're telling me that all this time royal lineage hasn't been a prerequisite, and it just so happens that the majority of people who have hearts of pure light happen to be royalty? Okay, I wasn't gonna go there, but can we talk about how this series has a monarchism problem? Like, why are we always going around helping kings get their kingdoms back? And it's always portrayed like it's a good thing. Most of these kings in this series are just pure good. This king right here, he's literally pure good, because he's also
one of the 5 people with hearts of pure light. And I know that they keep pretending that light and good aren't the same thing, but the way they treat them in the lore, in any instance where they're not explicitly thinking up some reason that darkness is important, and still not really telling us, they are treated as exactly the same thing. Good, light, same thing, right? Okay? There's just some kind of yin and yang balance deal between good and evil, where having both is better than just having goodness and not evil in some kind of unexplained, mystical sort of way. This dude's dad was a bad king because he was mind controlled into being a bad king. So we can put his son in charge, and now everyone in the kingdom is happy because they have a very nice king ruling over them instead of a bad, mean king. But bad kings are super rare in this world, and there's almost always some excuse like that as to why they're bad. And in cases where there isn't, it's because they're part of some race of people who is born evil, and then they get to uppity and try and expand their kingdom into the territory of one of the good kings. There's an agenda here, okay? You're not getting it past me, Nomura. I've been playing these games for way too long for you to... I've really been playing these games for too long.
So, you're finally ready to confront Dean at the top of the tower after that. I was ready for him, I came in with everything I had, and the battle lasted for like 2 rounds, because he wasn't the real final boss. Yeah, they legitimately got me this time, I'm willing to admit that. The dungeon I just fought through was long and hard, and they did a scene right before this that called back to a bunch of different points along the journey, and I totally fell for it. But nah, this clouded darkness that you have to fight afterward actually just wipes your party. You can't defeat it yet. You first have to go to the realm of darkness, where you still can't defeat it, but this time it's a real game over. But, you then have a chance to seek out the warriors of darkness from the legends and gather the power of the dark crystals one by one. And as you do that, they'll tell you about darkness and light. I'm not really sure it perfectly lines up with the ending from Kingdom Hearts 2, where they say that light and darkness and nothingness are all eternal, but honestly, that could just be something that Riku and Sora and Xemnas assumed anyway, because, like, how would they know? These guys seem like more of an authority, if you ask me, and they say that when you combine light and darkness, you get nothing. But you also can't have too much of one versus the other, or it'll swallow everything in both realms, and there'll be nothing. Ideally, you need the same amount of light and darkness, but you can never let them touch. They need to be separate, but equal. Don't let the 2 realms touch. They just each have their own people and their own communities, and they've got to both grow at about the same rate. And if they don't, then someone has to go whack the other side with a sword until they're equal again. That's the Kingdom Hearts lore now. I wish it weren't. I'm just working with what I've got. But let's not mix metaphors too much here. The unfortunate implications there don't probably amount to much beyond that, at least yet. This is not a game about race relations. This is a game about fascism.
Okay, I wasn't gonna go there, but can we talk about how this series has a centrism problem? It's exactly the kind of fantasy world that liberal centrism operates on. Final Fantasy III is basically the West Wing. Extreme darkness, extreme light are both equally bad here. Darkness, more of a problem right now, but it could just as soon be light. And then you need some reasonable warriors of darkness to step in and mitigate that light. But those warriors of darkness aren't like the cloud of darkness that's looking to envelope the world. They're more moderate than that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're on the side of light or the side of dark, because these 2 sides are really supposed to be working together anyway, or at least conflicting with each other in a civil way. So you end up with a nice gray center at the end of it all. And yes, darkness is perhaps trying to erase all existence, which we do oppose, but we don't oppose darkness. Some darkness is necessary. We just want
it to follow the rules. Whenever things start to swing too far toward darkness, of course, the moderate darkness warriors will then totally side with the light because they care about our interests too. They just have a different point of view than we do, which is why they're so valuable. The light, still the real heroes, of course, still the good guys, just as long as they don't get too light, because then who's going to keep them in check? Which is why it's also the duty of the Black Eyed Peas to stop the extreme light if that ever becomes a threat. It really doesn't matter which side is currently trying to erase all existence, because we're sort of warriors of light in name only. Well, the fact that the crystals approached us for the role, sure, of course, but it's really more warriors of whatever the current status quo is, okay? But that's also the exact thing Xehanort wants. He's clearly portrayed as the bad guy in all those future Kingdom Hearts games. So either A, Xehanort is right by the rules of their own universe, or B, Xehanort is wrong, seeking balance is bad, but after seeking imbalance, well, nobody should do anything ever, because you don't want light, dark, or in the middle, so just leave it the way it is. It doesn't matter what that is, that's right. Whatever's already in place is always right. So I know I said the crystals, and by extension the Warriors of Dark, are kind of the experts here, but I'll admit that was a little bit facetious. I actually kind of see Xehanort's story as like sort of a retcon of this idea that Nomura made later, because he started to realize the intrinsic problems with the established lore of the series. And really, what makes the crystals so smart anyway? Just because they're old and powerful doesn't mean they're right about everything. Beginning to feel like maybe they lack perspective. I guess I needed to get that off my chest. 10 out of 10 game though. If the original is as well balanced a game as the Pixel remaster, Nomura really found his stride with this game after a kind of rocky start with the numbered Final Fantasies. The final boss is satisfying to beat, not too hard, but not too easy, and it still feels like accomplishing an impossible task because of the first couple attempts where you just get totally wiped, and also because of how much stronger the game lets you get right at the very end. After the boss fight, will.i.am hooks up with Princess Sarah, which I figure might be important in the future since they're a Princess of Heart and a Warrior of Light, and they're about to have a very light baby. Who knows, maybe this is where Snow White comes from. It's probably not, but it could be. More important than that, they dropped this bit of lore on us. In the beginning, there was the void. Then came light and darkness. From them, everything was born. The heavens, the skies, water, fire, life. Time inexorably brings all back to its beginnings. But from life, something new was born. A shining force that separated the light from the dark and illuminated the world. It was called hope. When the balance between light and dark is broken and the world again slides toward oblivion, the chosen will appear once more. Do not forget that the source of the warrior's power is the hope that lives inside us all. They're probably talking about Sora. So, good news, we're done with that game and ready to talk about another Chip and Dale game. This one is just called Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, and it is a bigger game than Nimnul's Castle, so I guess that one was just kind of a prequel, which honestly, that makes a ton of sense. So the game opens with the Rescue Rangers getting a call about a lost kitten, and they take the case right away. So, I guess they're like a detective agency. And this girl gets a name finally, she's called Gadget. Zipper and Monterey Jack also return from the last game. The game is 2-player, so I had Maple help me out again, and together we set out to find that lost kitten. The robot enemies from the last game show up in the first stage of this game, along with a bunch of new enemies. Your main weapons are boxes and apples. The apples are heavy, but you can throw them at your enemies, and you can throw the boxes too, but you can also duck inside of them, and that'll hurt any enemies that touch you. This is a lot safer than throwing things around in 2-player mode, because you both have big hitboxes, and if you get hit by anything your friend throws at you, you will be stunned for a while, unless you happen to press the pickup button at just the right time to catch it. You can also just pick up your friends and throw them. You can't occupy the same space, so if you bump into the other player, they'll get pushed. but you can jump on them to reach higher ledges, just not while they're also jumping. If you get along as well as we do, you'll usually be cooperating, but every now and then you'll definitely end up attacking your partner on purpose to playfully punish them for running too far to the right, for you to grab an acorn, or pushing you off of a ledge, or hitting you with a box while you're in the middle of combat. The game is really, really hard in the best of times, so don't try playing this one with your friend if you're not playing with infinite lives turned on, like we were, or you'll probably just have a really bad time with it. The first boss is that sorta boss from Adventures in Nimnul's Castle again, but this time you destroy it by throwing a red ball up at him, which is also the first time I realized I could throw up. After you defeat it, you learn that the missing kitty was actually a trap by the villainous Fat Cat, whom I will not be unpacking, and Fat Cat has used the distraction to kidnap Gadget. But because Gadget is the smart one, she's still able to communicate with you and warn you about the oncoming dangers between each level. Stuff you would have figured out on your own, but still, it's nice to have bits of lore sprinkled between the levels instead of waiting for the end of the game to get one cutscene. As you progress through the game, the enemies get weirder. First, you've got the robots we already knew about from the prequel game, and then stuff you'd expect, like squirrels and caterpillars. But by the third stage, you're fighting kangaroos, and they're the same size as you are. And then you get to this area with these little green mimics, who take on the form of either Chip or Dale to mess with your head. And the box mimics and little slimy aliens start to show up. You even fight their ship, so you know these guys came from space. And then whatever these guys are, and then some more normal enemies like rabbits, lizards, and weasels. But there are also these rhinoceros football players thrown in there, like that makes any sense for them to be this tiny. And when you finally do confront Fat Cat at the end of the game, he's huge. Oh, but before you do that, you do save Gadget, and you get a rocket that takes you up into space, just to fly back down after the planet has rotated under you, which is how you find his secret base. So, there are some lore implications here. One, Chip and Dale can go to space whenever they want from the very beginning. They also live on a planet that's been visited by aliens. Two, most of the residents of the planet they live on are tiny creatures, including the ones that are normally much larger. But there are exceptions like Fat Cat, who's not just large relative to these two, but would probably also be pretty big compared to Mickey. So that goes toward answering the question of why Monterey Jack is small but Mickey Mouse is large. This does seem to be a result of the conditions on the different planets they came from. Glad we got that one figured out. There were two versions available of Mickey's ABCs a day at the fair. The first one had horrible screeching noises and DRM protection. The second one didn't. It didn't have any sound at all. I played that one, and you're welcome. This game has you going around Mickey's house, which seems a lot smaller now than it did in Mickey's Space Adventure, and you press letters to have him interact with things that start with those letters. You can spend a lot of time going around his house and finding stuff. There are even a few things that start with the same letters, so you might push B for brush and then immediately push B again for bed. There's not too much lore going on in this game, but we do find out that Mickey keeps a jar of cookies inside his fridge. Oh, and his oven is on fire, and he just doesn't care. Pressing F at any time will take you to the fair, and then pressing H will take you back home. So, if you were to press all the keys in order, you would only spend the letter G at the fair, and that's true if you're going either alphabetically or in order of where your keys appear on your keyboard. So you do have a few of Mickey's friends at the fair. That includes Minnie, Goofy, Daisy, and Donald. There's also a normal duck, confirming that all of those people ducks we've seen do live alongside regular ducks. So, yeah, maybe these are all just highly evolved versions of the animals, like, that they still live alongside on Earth. One of the chickens from the very first Mickey Mouse game is here, too. They do reappear. Actually, I'm kind of rethinking the lore a bit. I had initially assumed that Mickey and Minnie both lived in that house with the chickens from the first Mickey Mouse game, but now I'm thinking it's probably just Minnie that has the chickens, and Mickey happened to be helping her out in that one time. It only showed Minnie inside the house, and we've seen that Mickey has his own house, and it's definitely set up for just one person. Okay, so in Mickey's 1, 2, 3's The Surprise Party, Mickey is throwing a surprise party for someone. There are 9 options randomly generated. I had Scrooge on my first playthrough, and this guy Gus on my second. I don't know Gus, which is why I didn't invite anyone to his party. I just threw him a really bad party. He came in, I didn't feed him, and then he danced out the door. It was glorious. So this game follows the continuity from Mickey's ABCs. You can see that he has the same living room and kitchen here from that game. This time, you've got the option to go to the toy factory, grocery store, or post office. The toy factory just makes a toy that you can then give as a gift at the surprise party. This is the only one that doesn't show up at the actual party, though. The grocery store, Goofy works here. Goofy's had a lot of jobs. He also did retail back in Duckburg in the game Donald Duck's Playground, but this is a pretty different kind of store. You can buy hamburgers for all your guests, french fries, apples, milk, and then as many balloons as you want, up to 9 balloons. I wonder if the last game relied as heavily on audio as this one does. They might have been saying stuff out loud that whole game. Oh well. If you go to the post office, you can send out invitations to any of the 9 houses that are on this street. And those houses belong to 1. Goofy, 2. Daisy, 3. Minnie, 4. Donald, 5. Scrooge, 6. Horace Horsecollar, 7. Clarabelle Cow, 8. Chip and Dale, 9. Gus.
So I can't really say for sure, but based on this evidence, I think they're in Disney Town. A lot of these characters have hopped around from one planet to another as it is, but something tells me it's more likely that I was wrong about the 1981 Mickey Mouse game taking place on Earth. I didn't have a lot of evidence to base that claim on in the first place, but right now the only other possibilities are 1. Horace and Clarabelle are also interdimensional space travelers, and it just so happens that they lived on the same block back on Earth as just about every character that we've met who ends up in Disney Town. 2, this chicken is an interdimensional traveler, and Minnie brought her along when she came to Disney Town. 3, it's a different chicken, and Minnie raised chickens both on Earth and in Disney Town. So, yeah, those are all technically still on the table, but for now, I'm going to Occam's razor it and assume all these games go over here on our timeline.
Alright, next we got Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. So this game takes place in a location we haven't seen anywhere before called Vera City. It doesn't look like a city, but good news, everyone lives in peace except for one person. So pretty good. That's like Omelis numbers. But unlike the kid in the Omelis hole, this lady is not content to be the one miserable person and has decided to swap places with Minnie Mouse, who, true to her nature, gets kidnapped and held prisoner in a castle until Mickey comes and saves her. But this is no ordinary castle. This is a castle of illusion. So Mickey has to collect the 7 rainbow gems from the castle to defeat her, which means he has to fight through the woods, Toyland, the woods again, a giant bookshelf, Candy Island, a door that's just the regular castle, and a big clock in order to save Minnie. Since this is a new location, we don't have recurring villains showing up, although a lot of the bats here do look like Pete. Pete isn't a bat, is he? He's like a cat, right? Anyway, after all that, you finally get to confront Mizrabel. Oh my god, that's the Queen of Dwarf Woodlands from Birth by Sleep. Wow, she's here. Yeah, okay, she uses both forms in that game too. This is absolutely the same lady. Okay, so her name is Mizrabel, and this is her first appearance. I was not expecting her to show up here, I'll tell you that. Well, alright, so there is a post-credit sequence where they're in a theater with a bunch of other mice watching all this on a screen, but it doesn't matter because this is still totally canon. Mizrabel comes back in Birth by Sleep. So this is the second game to take place in the Dwarf Woodlands then. No idea which one happened first because they don't have any characters in common, but I guess this place is called Vera City, and I don't really like saying Dwarf Woodlands, so Vera City. There's not a whole lot to talk about otherwise. We know that Mickey has had a lot of adventures on a lot of different worlds already because we're from the future, although it is nice to see one of those worlds pop up here because so many of these old Mickey Mouse games really feel like they just have nothing to do with the overall plot, honestly. Oh, yeah, and it's good. It's a good game. They've been really nailing the difficulty lately. It's pretty much just right. A few cheap deaths toward the end, but nothing like some of that other crap they put out a few years earlier. I don't like that you still have to push down to attack enemies with jumps. That's like a holdover from DuckTales, I guess, but it made a lot more sense there because Scrooge uses a cane. It makes sense that you get hurt if you don't use your cane to attack. Mickey's ass isn't going to do significantly more damage than his shoes are, so that's just kind of an annoying detail. And closing out 1990, we've got the Final Fantasy Legend 2 right at the end of the year, just like the first Final Fantasy Legend. I went with the DS remake this time, and wherever this one takes place, they're aware of other worlds already and can travel between them, which isn't something we've seen a whole lot of this early on, with the exception of Mickey's Space Adventure and probably Chippendale Rescue Rangers, although in that last case, it's possible we were dealing with moon aliens like we had in DuckTales. We're introduced to a lot of returning mechanics from the first Final Fantasy Legend, like the weapon durability system, the unarmed attacks that get stronger the fewer of them you have left, the species-specific leveling systems, the meat system, and of course, the guns. There's also a bunch of new stuff, like robots. There's now a fourth race option. It's robots, and they're a lot like humans, but much rounder. There's also a relationship system that lets you decide exactly how you want all of your party members to feel about each other, from love, hate, family, friends, allies, rivals, whatever loner means in this context, and strife. There's also a new relic system, which is heavily tied to the main plot. You're supposed to assemble 77 relics to make a goddess statue. Each relic also has its own power, and some of them give you cool abilities, and a bunch of them also give you stat upgrades or whatever. So, one of the first things you do in this game is travel to a desert world using the Celestial Passage and fight Ashura from the first game. Yeah, remember Ashura? He was a Bowser puppet in my last video, and he's here again. Since the last game turned out to be just a video game, we're all wondering right away,
is any of this for real or not?
So you go around collecting relics, and one thing you start to pick up on is that Mira's dad is a lot more important than he seems at first. Like, first you're kinda looking for him, and he has the goal of taking on Ashura, but after you beat Ashura, you find him and you're like, we can go home now, right? And he says, no, because there are other strong people like Ashura that are still out there trying to get the relics. It's not really clear what he means by that, but then, not too long after that, you find him with this other family. And you don't really confront him at all or ask what's up, but Mira is pretty upset about it. And then basically right after that happens, you go to a bar and buy a really expensive drink, and the bartender is like, try the jukebox. So you do that, and it opens a passage to the secret lair of the Guardians, and your dad turns out to be their leader. According to this guy, he's an expert treasure hunter who has discovered the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and the 4 crystals. So, that actually does connect this to the mainline Final Fantasy games, where we've had to deal with the 4 crystals a couple of times now. It doesn't do a whole lot to help map our timeline, but it implies this and Final Fantasy III are probably not happening very close together, since I'm pretty sure none of those Onion Knights were your dad. This guy over here says that they're keeping an eye on the new gods, who include Ashura, Apollo, Venus, and Odin. This is in contrast to the ancient gods, who built a super civilization a long time ago. That has me thinking maybe this one's in the distant future. But of course, Odin was a minor character in Final Fantasy III, so if he's one of the new gods, maybe not.
Now, to make a long rant shorter, this game has a lot of problems. and takes a very long time to get through. The combat has a lot of really annoying RNG, and there are long stretches where none of my progress felt meaningful. It's also impossible to see every bit of content in a single run, because a lot of the side quests rely on team titles, which constantly change when you use the game's most powerful attacks, the link attacks, and which will lock you out of progressing through some side quests that follow you through the entire game. Some of these side quests are mutually exclusive and tied to the same NPCs. The lockout can also happen at any phase of a side quest, if your title happens to change from using a link attack. So, if you're playing the game normally, you end up getting permanently locked out of finishing most of the side quests you start on, and never having a chance to see a bunch of the other ones. Every time you die, you go to Valhalla, where Odin will give you the option to revive. Eventually, your travels take you through Valhalla, where you then have to fight Odin. I consider the Odin fight the beginning of the endgame, mainly because it's where the game goes from randomly being either easy or hard, as determined by a long series of randomized variables, to just really, really hard.
Now, after you defeat Odin, he's gone. He can't resurrect you anymore. He's gone for good. I'm pretty sure this is the end of the line for that character, which would align with my hypothesis that this is the latest point we've seen so far on the timeline. Now, according to Norse myth, he should just be able to revive at sundown to join the feast after dying in Valhalla, but I don't think this character was ever intended to be a one-to-one with Norse myth in the first place. That would also mean that everything that happens in the game after this point has to take place before sundown in the span of a single day. And to be fair, it is bright outside, so... Okay, let's say that you defeat Odin at the crack of dawn in the summer. It's 5 a.m. when Odin eats it. Then you fight your way out of Valhalla and move on to the next world. At 6 a.m., you get betrayed by Apollo and have all of your relics taken from you. You head to the final town to meet up with your dad again and learn about the final dungeon, which you travel to immediately without resting. You fight through the entirety of the final dungeon and defeat the robot and teleport back to town. Let's say you manage to accomplish all of that by noon. Now, you have the final showdown with Apollo, who transforms into a monster but starts melting soon afterward because your dad hid the 78th relic from the world and tricked Apollo into becoming an incomplete god. You meet up with the goddesses and travel through the entirety of the actual final dungeon at the center of the universe, which you got to by walking and taking an elevator. Let's say it's 6 p.m. by the time you face off against the actual final boss. In terms of gameplay, this is completely inconceivable, because your stats max out at a level so low, you can barely call yourself ready for the behemoth of a final boss you're about to face down, even if you're completely maxed out. And attacking it here without having rested in an inn or used a cottage to replenish your attacks is pretty much unthinkable, even accounting for the freebie you get from the goddess being in your party. She gives you one free revive, but that's not going to be enough. In terms of lore, this could arguably happen. The end credits give us an epilogue for a lot of the minor characters, but unfortunately, Odin's is a little cryptic. You see him in Valhalla, and then he just disappears. I think the intention is clear enough, though. He's dead for real. He's not coming back. And he doesn't want to. He wanted to die facing off against the strongest warriors in Valhalla. And he did.
So, I've said throughout the video where I'm placing a few of these entries already on the timeline. Mickey's ABCs, A Day at the Fair, and Mickey's 1, 2, 3, The Big Surprise Party are in Disney Town. I've also moved the original 1981 Mickey Mouse over there with them. So, next up, Final Fantasy Legend is going to go right down here at the very end of the timeline after every other Kingdom Hearts game has completed. There are elevators that take you between worlds and people travel through them pretty much whenever they want, which is not at all how it is in the mainline games, so it's probably quite a ways after that. DuckTales, The Quest for Gold. It's an immediate follow-up to DuckTales, so it's gonna go right here after DuckTales. Goofy's Railway Express. This one takes place on Earth. You visit Duckburg, so that's gonna also go in here with these. Final Fantasy III is definitely after the first two Final Fantasy games. It's probably before Dark Road. It's hard to place this one among Key and Union Cross. On one hand, the world is still forming, but then on the other hand, we do see Odin in this game, as well as the exact ideology that's going to be adopted by Xehanort. So not a whole lot of clues to go by, but I am inclined to put something in this space since there's such a massive gap between these two games. So for now, I'm going to put that one there. Chippendale Rescue Rangers, The Adventures in Nimnul's Castle, and Chippendale Rescue Rangers are going to take place pretty close to each other, sometime before the events of Birth by Sleep, but most likely sometime after intergalactic travel becomes possible. So right before the Tron era makes sense to me. And finally, Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse, takes place during Mickey's travels, where he finds himself in Vera City fighting the Queen before she became Queen. So that's going to go right before Tron 2. Okay, so that's the video. Special thanks to my patron, Squirrel Girl 98. So thank you, Squirrel Girl. Everyone else, you're welcome for the video. Okay, bye.